Hi guys, today we're talking about a sci-fi book that has had so much hype on the internet recently. Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Look at this beautiful 10th anniversary edition that I've got. I've just realised I'm holding it upside down. So let's talk about, is Red Rising actually worth the hype? Or is it just another dystopian sci-fi that has a very cool front cover and a very intense fan base? I have just finished the book and I've got some thoughts. I'd also love to thank those of you in my community who picked this book for the book club that we run every month on this channel. It was so much fun discussing our thoughts and opinions with you guys, and you made some very insightful points which I have stolen and intertwined into this video. Hope you don't mind. So give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy book reviews, or if you've read Red Rising. I would also love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, so let's keep chatting about it. So today we're diving into what works, what didn't work, and whether or not this book deserves all the hype that it gets, or is it slightly overhyped? So what is Red Rising about? So my interpretation based on reading this book, Red Rising is the first book in a dystopian sci-fi series, which is set in like a colonized, color-coded solar system. So what I mean by that is society is split up into different colors, different groups based on their color. So you have the golds, the reds, the pinks, all sorts of different colors. And it is based on Mars. We have Darrow, who is our main character, and he is a red. So red is basically like the working class. So they're responsible for mining Mars, getting all those good minerals and ores and whatever else you do when you mine. I wouldn't know, I'm not a mining expert, but Darrow is. And somehow or another, without spoiling anything, he gets pulled into a revolution where he is trained to infiltrate the golds by pretending to be a gold. But he's not a gold, he's a red. Which makes me appreciate the front covers even more, because the original front cover for this is red. So everything you can see on here, including all of these gold foiling bits, would normally be red. But for the 10th anniversary edition, they've made it gold. I really like that because that signifies what Darrow does. He is a red pretending to be a gold. That's not a spoiler because that happens very, very early on in the book. And it is like the main plot, but I'm not going to tell you how he gets to that point. You're going to have to read that to find out, which is a very cool storyline, by the way. So what I will say is that when people say that this is Hunger Games trials with the politics of Game of Thrones and the different houses, but it's set on Mars, that's exactly what it is. Hunger Games meets Game of Thrones set on Mars. That is exactly how I would describe this book to anybody who hasn't read it before. Feel free to let me know if you disagree with me. So the big question, is it overhyped? Now, I would just like to say, when I'm filming this video, I have only read book 1. What I will say, which is a very good sign, is that I will read the rest of the series. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's great. I'm excited to read the rest of the series. I've heard incredible things about it. However, based on just reading book 1, is it overhyped? Slightly, yeah. In my humble opinion. However, I have heard from other people that the series as a whole is worth its hype. Apparently book 2 is incredible. Lots of people are telling me I need to read book 2 immediately because apparently it just really steps it up a notch. And that book 1 is the weakest in the series. So based on just reading book 1, I would say at the moment it is overhyped. However, I have to take the full series into account because I'm not gonna lie, there have been other book series that are very, very hyped, but the series as a whole is worth its hype, but book 1 is disappointing and it's the weakest and it lets it down. Cough, Akatar, cough. In my opinion, if you base that series' hype on the first book, it's very overhyped. The first book is not that great, but the series as a whole is phenomenal. I am hoping that it will be the same for Red Rising and that this book is the weakest, even though it's still a good book. This is action-packed, it's fast-paced, and there are definitely moments where I kept needing to turn the pages because I couldn't stop reading, even though I needed to go to sleep because it was like 1 AM and I had work in the morning, but I just couldn't put it down. There were definitely moments like that in this book. However, I didn't finish it and then immediately want to scream into the void about how incredible it was. It didn't leave that long-lasting, impactful effect on me, and it didn't take my breath away. So for me, it didn't hit that level yet, and that was what I was expecting based on all the hype that this book gets. But like I said earlier, I have heard from other readers that the series gets dramatically better the more that you go into it, so that's kind of what I'm holding on to here. Let's talk about plot expectations versus reality, because obviously I'd heard a lot about this book before I read it. It's talked about everywhere. Loads of people online are talking about this book. So naturally I heard a lot about it. Nothing spoiled anything for me, but I just had heard enough in order for me to set some expectations. One thing that really threw me was that this plot did not go where I expected it to go at all, which is great. It was not predictable. The first few chapters set up this like really dark, oppressive dystopia, and I thought that we were going to be following a rebellion between all the different colours. Almost like a slow burn resistance story. Basically what I expected from this book one was what I expected from like the final book in the Hunger Games trilogy, where it's very much more about politics. You know, in Mockingjay it is about the rebellion, it is about politics rather than the Hunger Games trials. However, this very much followed the line of the first Hunger Games, which is more about the trials rather than the politics and the rebellion. I didn't expect it to follow that route. Once Darrow enters the Institute, which is a part of this book, it almost does become that Hunger Games trial, wars, Game of Thrones houses. I think my main issue here is that I couldn't quite connect the dots. Like, I didn't really fully understand why he was in these trials with all these other kids, when the plot at the start of the book introduces this rebellion and this big strategy and this big plan to infiltrate the Golds. I then didn't understand how the trials were overly relevant. It felt very far-fetched and a bit unnecessary for me. I feel like there are other ways that they could infiltrate the Golds without needing to do these random death trials with a load of other kids. It's not a bad direction at all, it was just unexpected, and after reading book one, it didn't fully make sense, but I feel like it might when I read book two or book three. I feel like the dots will be connected the more information that I get. But right now, I'm just kind of left a little bit confused as to why the plot went that way. It just shifted turn so drastically from where I thought it was going to go that I almost had to like recalibrate halfway through the book just to try and reprocess what was going on. And I think that the twist in direction and plot for this book was why it felt a little bit disjointed to me. I wasn't really sure what kind of story it was or what the plot was going to be for this book until about 60% of the way in. So yeah, the plot did not go where I expected it to go at all, which is a good thing because it wasn't predictable, but at the moment it doesn't fully make a whole lot of sense to me. But I'm sure that will change when we see the implications of the plot in this book in book number 2. Let's talk a bit about our main character Darrow, because for him I didn't know whether it was like character development or character transformation. He is a tricky one to root for. I didn't know whether or not I liked him. Now, here's the thing. So I am very much a believer of the fact that I don't believe you always have to like the main character in order to enjoy the book. There have been many books before where I cannot stand the main character, but because of the author's writing style, it's easy to follow, it's easy to view the world through their perspectives, it's easier to be in their heads even though I don't really root for them. I can still enjoy a book that way. Darrow is very, very tricky because he wasn't who I thought he was going to be. Like, the Darrow that started out at the beginning of this book compared to the Darrow at the end is very, very different, but I couldn't tell whether he'd developed and changed throughout the course of the book based on what he was experiencing, or whether he'd always been that way but we just didn't know and we was learning more about him. Because it was odd, it was very conflicted, as I rooted for him at the start and I really wanted justice for him based on what he goes through at the start of this book. But then towards the end, when we see the version of Darrow who's actually involved in the trials in the Institute, I then felt very unsure of what my opinion on him was. I do think that that is a strength by the author when you can't quite decide how you feel about a main character, or you thought that you felt one way about them and it turns out you don't and you're conflicted and you don't know how to feel. Like, Pierce Brown has messed with my emotions here. in the best possible way. Darrow goes through some extreme trauma. He physically transforms as well, which, by the way, I loved that chapter. That was one of my favourite parts of the book, was the detail that it goes into in terms of his transformation. And he gets thrown into this deadly gold culture that he knew nothing about when he was a Red. So I'm very unsure over whether this shift is due to character development based on everything that he's been through, or whether we are just learning who he really is as a person deep down. Was he always this ruthless? Was he always this cunning? Or are we just watching him harden over time? I don't know. So because of that, I found it a bit difficult to emotionally anchor myself to him, because there was so much about him that I wasn't expecting, and I didn't know if that was a new part of him because of everything he's been through in this book, or whether he had always just been that way. I want to feel more connected to his pain, and I want to understand his motivations more and feel more connected to his values and why he's doing what he's doing. But the emotional payoff right now doesn't hit home. It's not there at the moment, but I'm confident that it probably will be in book 2. I'm setting myself a lot of high expectations for book 2, aren't I? Now let's talk about the writing style, because I do have some opinions on this. Pierce Brown has a very distinct writing style. Like, I've not come across a writing style like this before. Maybe that's just me being uncultured in terms of reading, I don't know. But I haven't come across a writing style that's quite like this. It feels very Pierce Brown. Like, I feel like I could read a book without you telling me it was Pierce Brown, and if it was written in the same way as this, I'd be able to identify it. His sentences are very short and snappy, which is something I am so not used to. They're often very fragmented as well, and if you're not used to it, it can feel a little bit jarring. There were times where I had to reread paragraphs just to make sure I hadn't missed anything, because it just felt like the pacing moves so fast. No matter what is happening, no matter what is going on, everything feels fast-paced, and that is because of how short the sentences are. Like, it naturally quickens up the pace of anything you are reading. But I felt like sometimes it shouldn't have been that way, because sometimes there were some very serious scenes going on, there was some dialogue, there was some internal monologues, but because of the short, snappy sentences, it was very, very bang, bang, bang. Like, it was very fast. Like, there were so many times where sentences were about 3 or 4 words, and when you've got every single sentence like that, it's very stop and start. I think towards the end of the book, I was about 70% of the way in, and I remember thinking, can he please just use a comma or something? Because these sentences are so short, and I felt like it quickened the pace when it didn't need to. It was very, very disjointed, very stop and start when it didn't always need to be. What I will say is that this is just a personal preference. This is just my opinion. This is not a fact. I'm used to reading books that have longer sentences, commas. The pace can be quickened up when it needs to be and slowed down through elongated sentences when it needs to be. I do like a lot more description than this book gave. So sometimes it was a little bit off-putting. I do think that shorter sentences are brilliant for fast-paced action scenes. It really heightens up the tempo, and it gives Darrow this very intense, almost poetic inner voice. It's almost like the sentences are his thoughts, because in our heads, our thoughts can be very disjointed. They can be very all over the place. They can just be pointing out stuff that we're seeing and viewing, and that felt very, very realistic for somebody's internal monologues to think in that way. It just took a little while to get used to, and it is all just based on personal preference and what you've read before. So if you are somebody who prefers a more traditional prose, then this might be a learning curve for you. So, hype for the series, should you continue? Well, I already said it earlier, I will definitely continue. There is no umming and ahhing about it. There's no doubt in my mind I will be continuing this series. And here's the thing, every time I talk about Red Rising to somebody, they always say, keep going, the series gets so much better. And I believe them. Like, I am not one to judge a series because of a weaker first book. A lot of people tend to see this book as the foundation, and it seems like books 2 and 3 take the themes, the world building, and the emotional stakes to a whole new level, which I'm really looking forward to. I think that's going to be great. So while I'm calling this book slightly overhyped, I'm genuinely excited to continue the series. There is so much potential here. The ending sets up a ton of possibilities that will be explored in the future books, and the world building was rich enough to support that as well. Like, it's a very unique, very cool plot as well. I'm excited to see more of the rebellion side. I don't think we got that enough in this book, which is why, for me personally, maybe this was a little bit weaker, because I want to see more about the politics, the rebellion that got set up at the start of this book, but then was never fully explored throughout the rest of it. So the hype might be for the whole entire series. If I read the rest of the series, I'm expecting to state that it is worth the hype. However, just based solely on the first book, probably not yet. So my final thoughts and conclusions: is Red Rising worth reading? Yes, abso-flippin-lutely. But just maybe go into it with more grounded expectations than what the internet may tell you, because I was expecting this to be a 5-star read based on what everybody was saying about it. For me, it wasn't. It was a 3-star read. Still a great book. 3 stars for me is not a bad rating. That is an enjoyable book, one where I will continue the series and really enjoyed it. But the internet talks about it as though it is a 5-star read. So just go into it with some more realistic expectations. It's not perfect, it didn't completely blow me away, but it's ambitious, it's intense, it's clearly the start of something bigger. There is a fantastic plot here just waiting to be explored. If you love dystopian sci-fi and you don't mind a bit of a tonal shift halfway through, then Red Rising is definitely worth reading. And if you have already read it, please let me know whether or not I should pick up the next book. I mean, I already am going to, but please just let me know what you thought to it. So what do you think? Is Red Rising worth the hype to you if you've read it? If you haven't read it, do you feel like you would based on this review? So that is my review of Red Rising. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to give me a thumbs up to let me know if you enjoyed it. If you like book reviews and you want to see more from me, then please subscribe because it's free and it means that you'll see my videos easier. I also want to give a huge thank you to the members that are supporting my channel. It honestly means the world to me and you are so appreciated. Thank you so much. If you would like access to some cool perks and you'd like your name featured at the end of each of my videos, then please check out the channel memberships. Hopefully there'll be something on there for you to enjoy. Thanks for watching this video. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.